future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Colin.
Now we're on air. Okay.
Can't do it without the audience.
No
Cannot
way. We're
do
not.
it.
There's no way we're doing it without the audience.
No way.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. You've tuned into Dr. Judy WTF, and thank you so much for being our audience and watching and listening and commenting. I am your host, Walt Lusk, with Dr. Judy Rosenberg, and the WTF stands for What the Freud. And we're going to continue our series today on domestic violence. We had one person that commented on YouTube, you should call it domestic abuse. Mm-hmm. And this is a call-in show, and we had a call last week. So if you want to get on the couch with Dr. Judy with your emotional ouch, please feel free to do so. The number is area code 323-843-2826. That's 323-843-2826. And we are going to shrink a song that's very related to the topic at the end of the show. So
and very violent.
Stay tuned. And the words are violent. The song isn't really
So
violent.
I understand why the last comment was, why don't you call the last show domestic abuse? It's because the person who called in last week related domestic abuse. It wasn't quite as violent as I think people think of when we think of domestic violence. So thank you. I get that. I understand why you would want to rename the show that. So I want to talk a little bit about domestic violence and the effects of domestic violence on children, because domestic violence, watching domestic violence amongst your parents is a form of abuse.
That it is.
So what do you think that does to the psyche of a child? And what do you think a child's greatest fear is?
Well, that they're going to break up.
Absolutely.
And also, you know what? If you go behind closed doors, like in the bedroom, and you slam the door shut, and you raise your voices, do you really think they can't hear you?
Sure they can't. As you say, children are God's little spies.
Children are God's little spies.
Right.
They
and
are.
So when children are exposed to domestic violence, a lot of things happen. And I just want to relate a case study that I had many years ago. A woman who came to see me who experienced her father and mother go at it quite violently with each other. A lot of pushing, a lot of hitting. And at age 3, what did she choose to do? She chose to go between them and try to break up the party.
Age 3. Yeehaw.
Yeah. And so that's who she decided that she had to be at the time, because she was willing to throw herself under the bus, so to speak, in order to save her parents' marriage. And she grew up to be quite a nice little codependent, and she was actually a psychologist in training at the age of 3, because she was trying to do marital therapy, but it didn't exactly work. I think the parents ended up breaking up anyways, and she ended up with some pretty nasty core beliefs around what relationships are all about, relational core beliefs such as marriages don't last anyways, and why bother, and love hurts, and a lot of damage comes out of watching your parents fight, particularly fight to the point of escalation. So, Walt, I know that you did a lot of research on this.
I have, and
go ahead and
just to
share
expand
some of
last
that.
week's phone call. Mm-hmm. Just expand last week's phone call. The lady who called in, her father stayed with mom, even though the marriage was horrible, until she died, and then he stayed with his wife until she died. Or he died.
Yeah.
So she had a core belief that really was unrealistic in relation to things, even though the parents stayed together till the bitter end. So, which is sometimes good, but sometimes it's not. So core beliefs are very, very difficult to
So
counteract by
let
yourself.
me go to the mind map for a moment. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I created a mind map system for healing human disconnect. The mind map was originally intended to heal global disconnect and create a united humanity. My John Lennon idealistic mind created that. And so I decided to morph that into a micro project. So I went from a macro healing project to a micro healing project. And if you put the mind map up, if you don't mind.
I would love to, but we have a new board and we don't have the entire, all 9 panels. I have 1 through 9, but I'm missing the first one. I can't put it up. Sorry.
Oh,
if you want to go see it, you can go to
Okay.
drjudywtf.com and you can see the whole mind map. But I can whiz through the 9 panels.
Okay, so the mind map is a healing system that I created to heal human disconnect. And healing human disconnect really entails 9 steps. And so the 9 steps are identifying the wounds of childhood and how they embed in the psyche, and then how they embed into negative core beliefs such as I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I don't matter, I'm stupid, and there are a plethora of negative core beliefs that people encode into the fiber of their being. And once those negative core beliefs encode, we get triggered by people who activate those negative core beliefs and take us down into chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. So in the case of domestic violence, what's happening there is that somebody's wounds from childhood commingle with somebody else's wounds from childhood, and these somebody else's are the significant other of the person and the lover, the spouse, somebody really important. And so what happens is they're commingling their wounds of childhood and unconsciously activating them and sending each other on a very bad WTF, or what the Freud trip, which is panel 456, chaos, defenses, and breakdowns.
The fantastic staff here just put it back up.
Oh, awesome.
So
okay.
here it is.
So there it is. Okay, so the top third of the mind map represents our past and our past encoding, wounds of childhood, reactions, and encoding into negative core beliefs. Panel 456 is where most of us live. Chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. That's when I get the phone call, hey, Dr. Judy, I'm getting a divorce, or hey, Dr. Judy, my alcoholism is not working any longer, or whatever it is that's breaking down for people is where they're exhibiting symptoms and where they're really hurting. So that's when I get the call. I don't get the call when they're in panel number 7, 8, 9.
9 is unity, so
Right.
hey.
9 is unity,
Yeah.
7 is interconnection and paradigm shift and healing. But that's where we want to go. We want to go from, through, to. Encode, decode, and recode. Encode what happened to us in the past, decode it, and recode it into health. So back to domestic violence. Why is this happening? Blueprint. So what is the blueprint? The blueprint always comes from mom and dad, primary caretakers. It is multi-generational in process. And as a result of this multi-generational system gone wrong, 2 people get together and trigger each other, and they escalate. And when they escalate, it's not a pretty sight, and the fallout material is really horrible, and it ends up in chaos. And then the defenses break down because there's always somebody who's exploding, and maybe somebody who's being implosive and not expressing their feelings, not setting boundaries. So at the end of that game, there is panel number 6, which is a breakdown. And that is the system gone wrong of domestic violence.
Yes, and it is no picnic, folks. Before I jump in, I want to put a plug in. We're going to try and experiment on the first Thursday of every month, because we broadcast every Thursday at 8 o'clock here at UBN Radio Network. And the first Thursday of every month, we're going to do free-for-all calls. If you want to call and get on the couch with Dr. Judy, whatever your emotional ouch is, it doesn't have to be related to any show that we've done, or it would be good if it was, but it doesn't have to be related to the show that we're doing, then you know what? Give it a shot.
And the reason we're doing that is because there's so many questions and letters that we receive, and obviously we can't do shows on everything.
No.
However, we want to address your questions.
Yes,
so
we do.
Some of the requests have been about, why borderlines and narcissists do what they do and dance the way they dance, and if one gets better and the other one doesn't, what happens? And there have been requests for shows on hypochondriasis, and there have been a lot of requests from different people. So I thought that we should go topicless once a month.
You guys set the
and
topic.
Just pick the topic and go for it. And maybe you can suggest by writing to us go ahead.
And if you don't want to be on the air, but you want a question, just send us a question to info@drjudywtf.com, and I promise we'll read that question on the air on the first Thursday of the month.
Great. And if you want to suggest to shrink that tune for that particular episode, go for it.
Yes.
We love to shrink the tunes because music is a really great form of self-expression.
Yes,
and when you combine words with melody, I think that it goes down on a deeper level, a solar plexus level. And I think that that's where the wounds live. The wounds live deep down in there. And so the purpose of the mind map therapy is to exhume the wounds of the past so we can clear them out of the way and morph into something that is what I call the big I, or the self-actualized I. So do you think people who are engaged in domestic violence got up in the morning and planned to destroy each other? I don't think so. And so there's a little place in the brain called the amygdala. The entire limbic system rules our emotions. And when we are abused in childhood, we get a short emotional fuse. Why? Because in order to have a healthy human psyche, we have to have eye contact, skin contact, breastfeeding, consistency, mirroring, attunement. We have to have all of those emotionally necessary ingredients in order to form a healthy sense of self. So in the case of domestic violence, we have people whose amygdalas are overactive, and if you throw in there drugs, alcohol, and other drugs, then you're really lighting the fire. And so you're shortening the fuse even more and disinhibiting the system, gone wrong even more. And so everything goes wrong even more and goes quickly down into chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. So the defenses do not hold. So if people are trying to defend themselves by denying, or defend themselves by lying, or defend themselves by running, in the case of domestic violence, there is this drive toward confrontation. And I believe that in most cases, it is the women and the children who get killed. As a matter of fact, in my book, Be the Cause Healing Human Disconnect, I talk about how men will definitely have a higher propensity to not only homiciding, but before they suiciding, they will, before they suicide, obviously before, they will kill their family and children with the sense that if I can't have them, no one else will.
And that's a situation where the person has imploded and exploded.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's the end of the line on a system gone very, very wrong.
Absolutely.
So maybe, Walt, I know you did a lot
and
of research.
Talk about,
Go ahead.
Talk about domestic violence and death. 3 women a day. 3 women a day in the United States die as a result of domestic violence. In my book, it's 3 too many. Okay?
Yeah.
Domestic violence, contrary to popular belief, domestic violence occurs across all social, economic, and cultural backgrounds. It has no boundaries and exists among dating relationships, same-sex relationships, and older victims. It also impacts the lives of children, people with disabilities, and immigrants. So, and it's no respecter of persons. 1.5 million children a year are exposed to domestic violence. Okay, these numbers may be a couple old.
In America or
these are U.S.
in the
statistics.
US?
Yes,
Okay.
indeed. Victims are getting younger. 16 to 24 experience the highest rate of intimate partner violence. Okay, and there's no picking. Now, there's a whole bunch of different types of domestic violence. There's stalking. If you're being stalked, that's domestic violence. Physical abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse and coercion, reproductive coercion, financial abuse, digital abuse. Okay, so there's a whole different types of domestic violence, and there are signs for each of them. I'm just going to pick. I'm going to pick stalking here for just a sec. Where's the stalking one? Don't have it. I'll have to look for it again. Oh, here it is. But digital abuse is coming up more popular. You know, sending you insulting or threatening messages over text, email, or, of course, social media. Using social media like Facebook to track where you are and what you're doing. Demanding and sending sexually explicit photos, videos of yourself, or sending some of another's. Looking through your phone and checking your call history, your texts and pictures, right?
So it
That's
sounds like
your flipping business, not anybody else's.
helicoptering, right?
Helicoptering to the max.
Right, very controlling behavior. So where does this all emanate from? I'm always looking for the cause of the behavior rather than treating the behavior. It's important to dismantle it at the causal level. So I'm imagining that people who are controlling have a sense of loss of control early in life. And that is why they will flip around the system and become controlling. So it's actually coming from a place of feeling disempowered and using a false sense of power to make up for a sense of power that they don't really feel. And that's where the over-controlling behavior shows up. And so when the partner challenges that individual in terms of stating their own wishes, needs, and so on, their own sense of desire for being agents in their own life, the controlling partner feels that if they lose control, the other person is going to walk away from them. And so this sense of abandonment cannot be experienced. And the only way they know how to prevent themselves from being abandoned is by controlling the partner. I call it a kind of a different kind of a double dungeon effect in that they don't want the person to escape their net of control, because if they do, then they don't have the stabilizing relationship in their mind to feed them their, well, what I call the narcissistic supplies. So it becomes very messy.
It's extremely messy. I just want to pop this in real quick, since Dr. G mentioned it, about if you ever wanted to leave someone who is being domestically abusive of you, it can be done, and as you all know, it's not easy, but you must get all of your ducks in a row because
Before you announce it.
before you do it.
Right.
Yeah, before you even instigate it or do it.
Sure.
Because you pretty much only get one shot at it. Because if it doesn't work, then there's hell to pay, basically. You know, we're talking about counselors, friends, however it's done. You know, make sure it's pretty planned out and
Financially so
financially
also,
as well, because
if you're going to leave a relationship, get an
these
attorney
situations
involved.
aren't
Get
easy
your
to get.
priest, rabbi, whoever involved.
Yeah.
Get the community.
Yes.
There are domestic violence shelters.
There's a domestic violent hotline.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Do you have the
I'm
number?
going to look for it real quick. Yeah, here it is. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is pretty much this, is 800-273-TALK, TALK, 273-8255.
And is that for domestic violence?
Yeah, it's for
victims?
domestic violence, yeah.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. Not just for suicide.
No, it's in addition to domestic violence.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you, Walt.
The last one for digital abuse is ordering you not to turn off your phone and punishing you when you do or don't answer. And again, they want to know where you are 24/7 and what you're doing. And that phone rings, you got to, dance to their tune. Yep.
So people who behave this way were often treated this way. So going back to the blueprint, why is somebody behaving that way? Chances are they were treated that way, and so now they're treating somebody else that way. I mention much in my therapy that parents set the bar. And so if you come from a controlling, abusive family, it would not at all be surprising to end up in a controlling, abusive relationship because it's familiar and it is familial. And so what other people would think is just crazily out of their boundaries is now within the boundaries because people who experience this in their own family of origin have lived with this. So it's nothing all that unusual, and the tolerance level becomes higher. And so their recognition that there's really a problem tends to be less because they just think that that's the way life should be.
That's all they know.
That's all they know.
That's all they know, and they're
Right.
going to go back to what they know.
Right.
Signs of financial abuse, which is becoming more prevalent as well, is preventing you from having access to your bank account and your money, obtaining only permitting you to spend from an allowance, monitoring how you spend your money and deciding what you can and cannot spend it on, stealing your money or using your savings without your permission, and lastly, refusing to contribute to shared expenses such as rent, food, and childcare. I'm special. You need to pay for it all. Right? Psychological abuse is another one. I mean, physical abuse is pretty obvious. But psychological abuse, threatening to hurt you or your loved ones, your pets or your children or your possessions. Controlling the time you spend with others or monitoring where you go. Controlling what you wear, often with the accentuation that you attract too much attention. Damaging or stealing your belongings. Blaming you for the abuse, saying you deserve what happens and you instigated the problem.
It reminds me of people who say, well, the reason you got raped or molested is because your skirt was too short or you were showing too much cleavage. And so I think that people who get convinced that they're the cause are people who've played victim all their life, and so it's easy for them to think that they're the problem and play into the system of them really instigating, because that's what the controlling individual wants you to think, is that you're the instigator, you're the problem, and they're trying to manage you because you're out of control.
Big time.
Right.
Big time. We're going to talk, John, in a minute about how to avoid all that, but in the last one, signs of psychological abuse, gaslighting. Saying things to make you question your perception of reality.
Right.
Such as, that never happened to you. You never remember it correctly. Don't get angry over such little things. You're too sensitive.
When you hear that you word, you know there's a problem.
You.
Right. You, finger pointing. So the best defense is offense. So panel number 5, defense mechanisms. If somebody's trying to control you, they'll try to shove you in panel 5 so that you're too busy defending and not noticing their offensive behavior and their offensive controlling behavior. Because, again, you're consumed with, what did I do wrong? And that's the gaslighting. It's a real interesting way to drive somebody crazy. I think there was an Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Could have
that
been.
Was called Gaslight.
I don't know. I'm a big Hitchcock fan. I don't remember.
remember that in the movie it was a
could very well be
a psychological thriller.
Yeah.
And the guy was driving the wife crazy, and slowly but surely she was losing her mind because things were happening and he was denying that it was happening, and she kept questioning herself. So that's part of the control, where your partner will put you in a position where you will continue to question yourself in the face of some pretty harsh facts that are undeniable, and yet the person's so convincing.
Yeah,
that
they'll
you will
twist it around because they're
they'll twist it
very
around.
persuasive.
Right.
Yeah. And then signs of emotional abuse: attacking your self-worth, insulting you, calling you names, criticizing you, humiliating you, acting jealous or possessive, accusing you of being with other partners. And this one is interesting, is like, they're trying to protect you. I'm just worried about you, when in fact it's just a total smokescreen for the fact that they're, they own you, and they're very jealous of what you're doing.
And that's how they flip it around.
Yep.
They flip it
I'm
around
just
to
trying
make
to
it look
protect
like
you.
they're protective.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't feel right, it's not right. If it doesn't feel loving and kind and protective, it's not.
It's not. It's just not.
Not.
Withholding affection or acknowledgement in order to punish you, cheating on you intentionally, and of course lying. So those
All
are
of the
some
above.
emotional abuse ones. Yeah. So this is a call-in show. So if you really want to get on the couch with Dr. Judy, and you've been violently or abused domestically, call us. Number is area code 323-843-2826. That's 323-843-2826. Or internationally, you can call us on Skype at UBN, which is Universal Broadcasting Network, UBN Radio number 2.
So I'm working with, I'll call it case number 8643, okay? A woman whose father is very controlling, and this is not just a single case, this is generically many cases that I'm all wrapping up in one case study. Father is very, very wealthy, very, very controlling, married a younger woman, dumped his wife, and does not let his daughter flourish because she has to be part of his plans. So she has no mind. She cannot have a mind. She cannot have an opinion. She cannot have her own life goals because everything is under the thumb of her father. So what she does to try to escape the situation is to hook up with another dysfunctional person who she thinks might be her escape route out. But turns out to be that this person is just another WTF, and he too is controlling.
So she just jumped out of the frying pan into the fire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I see a lot of cases very, very similar to this. And so intelligent people get trapped into this. So don't think that this is a matter of lack of intelligence. This is a matter of blueprinting gone wrong. And as Freud said, we will repeat things until that psychological file is closed. So we will actually unconsciously attract to the wounder in order to play out that entire horrible, dysfunctional scene and hopefully have a happier ending. But there is no happier ending. It just keeps cycling through wounds, reactions and coding, and then boom, boom, boom. Chaos, defenses, and breakdowns until somebody intervenes and somebody pulls the plug on a system gone wrong.
Well, there you go. So we've talked a little bit about the signs of domestic violence, and then we're going to talk now about how to avoid it in a perfect world, of course. First off, knowledge is power. When it comes to preventing domestic abuse, learning to recognize the distinct patterns and behaviors associated with an intimate partner can be life-saving. Most abuse partners choose, test, and prime their future victims before they ever lay a hand on them. So learn their tactics, watch for red flags, and always, as Dr. Judy has said, follow your instinct. Because if it's not right, it's not right. And if you're in a new relationship, it's not the end of the world if you step back and take a break.
And I'm always a fan of going into relationships slowly. It's
Very
easier
slowly,
to
yeah.
really take inventory on who this person is and see how she or he functions under stressful circumstances, how he or she treats other people, animals, the waiter, what their impulse control is like. You want to know whether they're using or abusing drugs, and this will tell you a lot about the individual.
And also if they're rushing to like move in together,
Yeah.
I mean, where's the fire, right?
Right. Right.
You don't need to rush into anything, right? I think that's one of these, but I'm just going to throw it in. Second is don't compare. Abuse is abuse. Even when you're assaulted but not physically injured, even if you hit back in self-defense, or even if it happened when there was alcohol involved, abuse is not defined by the severity of the injuries or by the number of police reports made. Avoid comparing your experiences to that of other people. Do you feel safe in this relationship? And that's the question. Do you feel safe with this individual? If you don't, it's not going to happen.
So what does that mean to feel safe? That they're not violating your boundaries. They're not violating your personal space. They're not showing up at your doorstep at 3 o'clock in the morning trying to get into your home and sweet talk you back into the relationship when you're exhausted and your defenses are down. That they're not creepily showing up at your work and pounding you and hounding you to get back together with them. So that you could break down and get back together with them because you don't want to cause a ruckus. They know what they're doing, and you need to know what they're doing in order to play chess with them and win this game. And the best place to be with people like this is not to be with
far
people
away.
like this.
You are worthy. Talk about core beliefs. You are worthy. You weren't born with the "I'm not worthy" on your forehead. And if you don't believe me, go home, look in the mirror, and see if it says on your forehead, "I'm not worthy."
Right.
If it doesn't say that, you're worthy.
You're worthy.
Believing yourself to be valuable, capable, and deserving of happiness may give you a sense of strength to leave the relationship that turns out to be very dangerous. When we recognize ourselves as worthy of a healthy, respectful love, we can better identify the partners that don't reflect that in the relationship.
And going back to the blueprint, what you'll often find is that your own parents didn't reflect that in their relationship with each other or their relationship with you, which makes it very easy for you to fall prey to people like that because you're just following the blueprint. And again, it sounds very familial and familial.
And here's the one. Do not walk out unless you are willing to walk out. When searching for a romantic match, you must make up your mind beforehand that you are comfortable ending the relationship if you need to, if your needs are being met. Decide early in the process that you are never going to be attached to the outcome and that you end up sacrificing your principles or your safety.
And by the way, there's this new way of leaving relationships called ghosting. And I recommend that if you're with somebody who's domestically violent, it's not a good idea to confront them because you don't know what you're going to get in response to their need to control or their issues with abandonment. So if you've got to leave, you have to be very strategic about it. And so you don't want to red flag this and say, hey, look, I'm out the door, because they'll slam the door literally in your face. So it's not a bad idea to just silently disappear on these people. Oh, gee, I was called out of town and don't know where I'm going to be sent on my work mission, and very vague and just kind of fade away into the sunset. And your primary concern is your safety.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that means you don't tell your friends on Facebook where you went.
Oh, yeah, right. Thank you, Walt.
Yeah. You might want to close your Facebook account.
Yeah.
Jealousy can be a destroyer, a Trojan horse of a relationship abuse. Jealousy may feel like a welcome gift, displaying evidence of a lover's strong feelings or his fear of losing you for another. But possessiveness is an abusive individual is not about real love. It's about ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what real love is.
So here is part of the narcissistic shell of that person. So a person who's been narcissistically injured, we talk a lot about narcissism, doesn't really feel true empathy. So instead of feeling empathy and feeling a connection to the person, their plan B is just to own and control, because they don't themselves feel worthy of being loved. They don't know how to feel loved. They don't think that emotions are valuable. So possessions are valuable. So if you start feeling like a possession to that person, you know that you're in the wrong hands. And why would you even get in the wrong hands? Because your family of origin may have treated you like a possession, which sets up the whole domino system of being at the effect of a new relationship that's replicating the old causal relationship. So everyone listening, I really want you guys to start thinking like a shrink and understanding that this is a system gone wrong and it is multi-generational. And rather than looking at it as a fault thing, it's a causal model. So you could say, look, my parents were the cause, and their parents were the cause, and their parents' parents were the cause. And so you have to take this matter into your own hands and say, the buck stops here, and I'm going to break the spell, and I'm going to get some help, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to dismantle my wounds of childhood and how they embed into the fiber of my being, so I don't spread the psychovirus, as I like to call it.
And along those lines, we have another way of avoiding domestic violence, and that is beware of isolation. Mm-hmm. One control tactic used to separate victims from supporters is that otherwise identify the abuser or assist the victim is isolation, which can be accompanied by physically moving the victim to a remote location, disabling their communication devices, or turning the victim against their connections.
That's very common. Turning their victims against their mother, their father, their sister, their brother, because, again, they want to be number one, because they're the most important people in the world, and they can't stand the idea that you have relationships with other people, because that's a threat to their sense of control, and it's a threat to their sense of importance.
I had a friend who got fully taken advantage of, and they had gone through their phone and removed blocked a couple of phone numbers of family and friends who would have figured out that what they were doing.
That's another part of it. They don't want anybody to figure out what they're doing.
No, they
right.
don't. No way.
So they isolate them.
They isolated them, and it was very, very simple. They just put the block option on their cell phone, so if anybody called or texted, it never went through. And one of their friends said, "Hey, what's going on with your phone? What's going on?" And this was way down the road, and they were, the whole thing had been starting, and they figured it out.
How come my sister never calls? How come my mother never calls?
How come when I call and it all goes directly to voicemail?
Yeah.
Very, very coyly, they got a hold of their phone and they just blocked the phone number. They didn't pull it out. It was there. But, they were very, very systematically isolating them without them even knowing.
Yeah.
It's really
and then,
slick.
Of course, then they come up with the conclusion that nobody loves me, but this person loves me.
There it is. I'm here for you. I'm here for you.
So that person becomes their hero.
Yeah. So, it's they know what they're doing. This is not their first rodeo. Assess threats. While assessing verbal threats from an abuser, consider context, purpose, ability, and content. As a general rule, the more detailed the threat, the more likely it is to be followed through. Remember, too, that the abuse of threat does not equal, the absence of threat does not equal safety.
Right. So by putting fear into the person's heart, they start the process of weakening the individual. It's kind of like weakening the prey and then attacking. Right? Gaslighting them, threatening them, creating a paranoid, isolative world, controlling world, and then come in for that final, see, I told you I'm the only one there for you. I told you that I'm the only one that knows what to do. So then that bleeds into physical abuse too. So yes. I'm going to control your money. Honey, I know what I'm doing here.
This is best for you.
Yeah, this is best for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Know if it's high risk. Again, we're back to probably your gut. Some types of abuse are more highly correlated with intimate partner homicide than others. For example, strangulation, threats with weapons, or sexual abuse of high-risk markers. In domestic violence situations, use extra caution in exiting this particular type of relationship.
Right.
Yeah,
So
'cause
you don't
they're
want to
really
be
physically abusive.
you don't want to be isolated by these people. It's really, really dangerous. Yeah.
The abuser is not your responsibility. You cannot fix them.
And they like to prey on people pleasers
Yes,
and
they do.
codependents
Yes,
and
they do.
empaths and soft-hearted people, because they're depending on that person to feel bad for them. They don't feel for the person, but
also
they're
don't-
depending on them to feel for them.
And they don't think like the perpetrator. It's not in their DNA to do what they're doing. Well, that person would never do that.
Or their psycho DNA.
Or their psycho DNA.
Right.
If they're already doing it, they just don't know, and it's like, well, I don't understand. That's not in my DNA. And well, guess what? No, it's not in, but it sure as heck is in theirs.
Yeah, and so people who are innocent victims of these people were also injured at cause, right? That's what I've been saying all
Yes.
along, is that it's a peg and groove situation. So they're going to track their wounder and play it all out. And the point of all of this is that you really have to unravel your childhood wounds so that you become conscious of them and don't fall into these unconscious patterns that waste so many years of time, cause so much depression and anxiety, and need to really fill the hole in the soul. And it's just really a very, very bad downhill spiral for everyone who gets trapped in.
Understand your resources. Understand the roles of the police, advocates, prosecutors, and judges can help prepare victims for the reality of working with social services and criminal justice system. I know this is way overwhelming for a lot of you, but you know what? It happens. A wide variety of resources exist to support people who are trying to escape domestic abuse. So identify and assess your allies before you even make the final leap to safety.
And restraining orders are available. So
Yes, and
if
they're
somebody
very
violates
effective.
you, then you pull a restraining order on them, and therefore it goes on record. And if they come anywhere within a certain vicinity of you, then you have a right to call the police, and they will be arrested.
That includes phone calls, texting, and everything. Yeah,
Right.
no contact.
Right, no contact.
No contact.
So these people apparently need a lot of boundaries, and if you can't do it, then then enlist the protection of the law, and they'll help you. And there's nothing wrong with gathering information and talking to the police department or talking to an attorney and getting legal advice, because really you want to know what your rights are. If you've been violated in this way, then you have a lot of alternatives. You don't have to be victim to this.
And you're not alone.
Right.
You're
For
not
sure, you're
alone.
not alone. What did
No
you
way.
say? How many millions of people
Well,
fall
50
victim to domestic violence?
Well, hold on a second. I have to look for that. But 15.5 million children a year are,
Yeah.
just the children alone.
Yeah.
And 3 women a day die because of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how many are almost put in the hospital and don't die? I mean, the numbers are mentionable.
So look, the perpetrators are having no picnic either, because they were wounded, and as I like to say, hurt people hurt people. So they don't know how to do anything other than project on other people. And so what they're doing is that they're living in pain themselves, and they're trying to rid themselves of pain by putting others in pain. And so often you'll find that the person who's taking the violence out on another person may get some kind of a temporary relief, but ultimately it doesn't work, because neither explosion nor implosion works. The only thing that works is expression and unloading your feelings in a safe, therapeutic, atmosphere. So people who are loaded with this kind of level of pain and are exploding, or people who are loaded with this level of pain and hook up with people who are exploding all over themselves and imploding, each individual who is in this cycle of violence, playing different roles in the system, need to identify the cause and dismantle at a causal level, not just dismantle at the symptom level. Anger management techniques are only good for so long because, if you don't get to the root cause of the problem, you're going to have a lot of anger management techniques to manage anger that really belongs at the causal level, meaning the original blueprint, the people who caused the issue, mostly mom and dad, and their mom and dad, and their mom and dad. So really consider the multi-generational effects.
And if you've been a victim of domestic abuse and violence, then you have a resource, and that is the Psychological Healing Center and Dr. Judy and her staff. And if you can hear this voice, whether you're in LA, the Sherman Oaks or Beverly Hills area, or by phone or by Skype, you can actually contact Dr. Judy and can help you hugely.
Yeah, and if you're a victim of domestic violence, then again, by tapping into your own wounds of childhood and figuring out what the heck you're doing there in the first place, it can help bust patterns so that you no longer have to fall victim to these people again, and you can recognize the patterns and morph out. And if you're a perpetrator of a violent crime, then you probably belong in a more aggressive program than just outpatient psychotherapy. You might belong in an inpatient system because, again, you can't treat a person that you're afraid of. And if somebody is very, very prone to violence, they can't really be in outpatient psychotherapy. They need to be in a place where everyone is safe because, again, you can't treat somebody if you're afraid that they're going to explode on you.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So if you want to know more or the notes from the show, you can always write us at info at Dr. Judy WTF, and we can, as a resource there. We are now going to go to our Shrink That Tune, which is a little bit of a long song. It's titled The Last to Say by a group called Atmosphere.
Right, and so if you've been triggered by domestic violence, then you may not want to listen to this song because it's pretty
heavy
violent.
It's a pretty
right.
heavy song.
Yeah.
As far back as he cares to remember, he used to see his old man lose his temper, and Mama's pretty face catch it all. On a regular basis, the nest would fall, but he was always safe from Dad's rage.
Well, again, it seems like a mother and a father and a child who is reminiscing on how things were, and Mom would catch it all. It seems like she was the scapegoat of it all.
Yeah, she was the brunt of it. 'Cause Mama's sacrifice in his place, 24 years of the blood, sweat, and tears. Avoid the minor, losing her hair from the fear. She never left him, stayed inside. He beat her up until the day that he died. In fact, the biggest beating was the day that he died.
Well, she really put herself in the middle of this, and 24 years, it sounds like Mama protected her minor, and she really suffered from it, losing her hair from fear, and yet she stayed with him. She stayed with the whole family, it sounds like, and he kept beating her, and she didn't go. Where do you think her self-esteem was, right?
What self-esteem?
Right.
Because now it's too late to make her. It's not too late for her to make a new life. She gets to mourn for the touch of a punch. Wouldn't even admit that she ain't clutching it much. Someday she'll die and still won't be done. The anger lives on through their son.
And there's the multi-generational thing. Even though he was victim to it, he's been infected by it. And it's interesting how they talk about mourning for the touch of a punch. It's almost like she feels that she still aches for that system because it's familiar. Yeah.
It's what you know.
Yeah.
what you grew up with. Because he caught it all. A childhood of watching Ma and Pa get raw. It's too bad for him. Now that's half the truth. Because you back with him now, and he's smacking you. What happened to you? You don't have a clue. Didn't your mama used to suffer accidents too?
Well, the kid is watching all of this, and he's just, clearly he's infected by the whole thing, and now he's in it. Now he's in the system.
He's in it.
Right.
He's in it. I never knew that you would stand for abuse. I guess I just assumed that you would pack up and move. Think about when you left him last time. You said out loud you'd never forgive past crime. Sunglasses so dark, scarf around the neck to cover the choke marks. And since you got it, justify returning. You convinced yourself that he's just a hurt person. You want to blame the cross he bears, but his papa's not there when he tosses you down the stairs.
So here his mark is a wife who is an empath, right? Because she hides the marks so she doesn't go public with it, and she justifies her returning because she sees him as just a hurt person, and of course she's going to fix him, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, every time. Let me be the last to say, please don't stay. Let me be the last to say, you won't be okay.
Well, there's some reality check, right? It's never going to be okay, so get the hell out of there.
Yeah,
Don't
it's time
stay.
to pack up and go. Please put your shoes on and step on that warm weather. Go get yourself a more better forever. That's a great line. Gotta put it down. You gotta leave it. And don't ever come back again. You gotta mean it. Just tear it all apart and build new. Because if you don't kill him, he's gonna kill you. You can't hold hands when they make fists. And I ain't the first to say this.
It's amazing. So it sounds like the son is talking almost, or I can't really understand.
It might be a friend.
Friend, or
Yeah, it could be a
somebody
friend or
saying,
a
get the hell
relative.
out of there,
Yeah,
go
pack up
step
and go.
into the warm weather of the future, get yourself a more better forever. But she's not going to unless she unwinds the wounds of her past and identifies her horrible core beliefs and patterns. She's going to find somebody else to do it to her. And so it's nice to say, don't come back again and mean it, but guess what? She'll probably be back again with somebody else. Because if you don't kill him, he's going to kill you. So what needs to be killed is the old blueprint and the old patterns. That's what has to die. You can't hold hands when they make fists. So fists are a human disconnect. They don't connect. They don't link together.
Gotta put it down. You gotta leave. Get yourself a more better forever. You can't hold hands when they make fists. And then lastly, let me be last to say, please don't stay. Let me be the last to say, you won't be okay. Let me be the last to say, please don't stay.
And typically, they don't listen. They may leave temporarily,
They think they
but
know
then they'll
better.
be back.
Yeah.
Unless they do a lot of work in therapy, they'll be back into the cycle. Panels 4, 5, 6, chaos, defenses, and breakdowns.
So that's our song, folks. Atmosphere, The Last to Say. We're going to play that here. And if you want to write us, you can. Again, it's info@drjudywtf.com. Dr. Judy Rosenberg, which is the founder of the Psychological Healing Center in Sherman Oaks and Beverly Hills, and, of course, does therapy all over the world. And I'm your host, Walt Lusk. We're here every Thursday at 8 p.m. Pacific here at ubnradionnetwork.com. And you can catch us on Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and, of course, YouTube. So thanks for liking, sharing, and watching. And until next time, God bless everyone, and here's our song.